Thank you, Bruce, for joining us today on what is the 10th anniversary of the opening in Manchester of Ghost the Musical. Just to start with, and going back to the very, very beginning, what gave you the idea for Ghost, and what were your inspirations?
The beginning.
Yeah, the very beginning for the film.
Uh, I wanted to tell a story about a ghost from the side of the ghost. And I didn't want to just see people being haunted. I wanted to know what it's like to survive death. What does that mean? Where does that take you? What does that mean to the larger philosophy and spirituality and religious life of human beings? So that was my goal. And then I had to find this story. I had to figure out what it was going to be. I had a feeling it would be a love story. I had a feeling that the ghost would come back to connect with his uh, girlfriend, or wife in this case, girlfriend. And then I had to sort of create lives for them. I kind of wanted her to be an artist. My idea was a sculptress, like Marisol, who used to make these huge, big sculptures, which I really thought were powerful. And I wanted her to be a powerful woman because she would have to live without her lover at the end of the show. And I wanted people to know she could. And that was really really essential in a way. In the end, of course, she became a potter, which is interesting because my wife is a potter, and everyone in the world imagines that the pottery scenes come directly out of my wife's and my sexual and emotional life, which is not true. I have no desire to hold on to the pots that she makes, uh, but I really I found a story emerging that the important part was Sam became a banker, and then when I realized he was killed, and then I had to figure out all the pieces that went into it, and how does he get back to communicate with Molly? And what what I started to think of was some kind of a psychic. In my mind, originally, it was a man. It was a kind of a false prophet in a way, or maybe not, but he was not. He was not somebody that I understood to be a comic figure. And I remember when I first started trying to sell the idea of ghosts to the studios, I pitched it to Bruce Evans and Ray Gideon, who had done a film called Stand By Me, and they started laughing when I talked about the psychic. And they said, "Boy, she should be really funny and culturally different." And it hit me that, oh my God, yes, if she's really fake and discovers she can really hear this person, there's a story in that. And I didn't know what a gift it was until I started writing her, and she just found her own voice very, very quickly. And that's when I found I had a movie. And then, to be brief, I pitched it to the studios for 2 years with nobody interested. And then I learned more and more about pitching, which is where you tell the story in 5 minutes to an audience. And I realized you have to make the people who are listening to you like 5-year-olds, and you're the kindergarten teacher. And how do you hold their attention? And it finally dawned on me, stupid little things like Sam gets shot. Instead of saying that, I went like that. And the minute I did that, whoever I was pitching to kind of sat up, and I could tell I got them. They had just engaged in a way like a kindergartner, and that was meaningful. After 2 years of pitching, on the last week of pitching, I had 5 studios wanting to do the film, and it was really extraordinary. So that's how it started. It then became, of course, a film that was infinitely more popular than I had ever imagined. It was the top grossing film of the year it came out, 1990. And, and that was that. People wanted to do sequels. I was not interested. And people wanted to, at one point, make a musical, and I was not interested. But that will be our discussion today.
Yeah, I believe the film was somewhat of a family affair. Obviously, you just mentioned there that your wife was the inspiration with the pottery side of it. But how many other characters in the film were based on family members?
Well, not that many. I did another film called My Life, in which I actually involved in the making of the film most of my family members, which became a really difficult, tragic situation because if I had to make cuts for the story, but I can't cut out Wendy. I can't cut out my brother. That was really hard. The only thing about Ghost was that in the making of the film, my mother, who had been a amateur actress and kind of brought me into theater itself, I wanted her to have a part in the movie. And Jerry Zucker always had his family in the movies. You know, he had his, you know, mom and dad and sisters and everybody. And in Ghost, they're all there. So I said, Jerry, can I have my family in the movie? He said, Bruce, the director has his family, the writer gets his mother. And that was it. And I got my mother, and she plays the nun who gets the check for, I think it was then $4 million, and faints. It brought her to instant stardom. And in Detroit, when the film opened, I was from Detroit, the film on the marquee said Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg, Sandra Rubin. And it was the highlight of her life.
Absolutely fantastic. Who had the first idea of turning the movie into a musical as opposed to a play?
A number of people came to me, and my only response was, why would I bother? Why should I do that? It already works as a movie. I really, I didn't see an advantage in taking it any further. Also, I was very worried if I were to have it turned into a musical, other people would come in and take control of it. And they may not have a connection to the deeper underpinnings of what this story is. You know, I mean, the story is essentially saying somehow or another, we exist before we're born and we exist after we die. That's a very big realm to play with. And for people who don't see that larger context, the reality of Ghost for them is more just a kind of a playful fantasy. And for me, it was never ever just a playful fantasy. It was a bigger introduction to a mass audience of something larger. So I didn't want to do it. And but then a number of people came to me. One of them, David Garfinkel, decided to have dinner with me in New York with my wife at Orso's restaurant. And we sat down there, a real theatrical restaurant in New York, 46th Street. And he started telling me his version of the musical. And I started going, this is kind of interesting. He started understanding the song as the underlying thought process or mind reality of the character that doesn't get expressed other than in a couple lines of dialogue. And I thought that could be very enriching, and I really liked that. And then I kind of opened the door to it, and then Colin Ingram from London and David, who were partners, got together. David was in the middle of doing Spider-Man on Broadway, so they all had credentials. And they came to my house in upstate New York at that time, and they were trying to sell me on the production. And I was very, if maybe, I don't know, I don't think so, but we really kept talking, and all of a sudden we realized they had missed their train back to the city. So they were now house guests for the night. And somehow that was very important, because somewhere during the course of that night, I went, I think I should do this. This could be really, really interesting. And so it was given birth that night. I took a photograph of them standing in my butler's pantry, and it was like, it codified, this was the beginning. And I think that was back in like 2008 or something like that. So, you know, it takes a long time to develop something like this. But once that happened, things got into motion, and here we are talking 10 years after it opened.
Absolutely. Was it easy to adapt the film to a stage show?
It was fun. I don't know if easy is exactly the right word, because a lot has to go. And you have to begin to understand what can be taken out, how you replace these simple lines with a song that expresses a deeper, more foundational part of the character. And that I really, I found very compelling. I liked it. The only problem was, of course, that I am not a songwriter or lyricist, and there was no way in the world that I was going to be doing the music for the show. And that started to get me very nervous. Like, who will come in and write the songs? I could take the book and I could say, dialogue, song goes here. And that's kind of what I did. And then we began the journey to find a composer. And that journey was hard, because people come in with different voices, different ideas. One very major singer came in and just wanted to take some of his unproduced songs and lay them in as the songs for the show. And I went, but Oda Mae wouldn't say those words. She wouldn't sing that. That song wouldn't really work. And I'm talking, really major songwriters. And I got nervous. And then we did hire people to do the music. And I was worried that they didn't understand the syntax of the show. But I said, we'll see. And then one of the lyricists came to visit me with the first part of the first song. And I listened to the first words and I went, this has nothing to do with Ghost. Every fear that I had going into this suddenly was in front of me. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had to call the producer and say, I have to veto this selection. It's not going to work. And he said, well, you don't have to veto it. They just quit, which was a great relief. And so I said, I'm going to write the lyrics for the show. And I had never written a lyric in my life. I used to write poetry when I was 8 years old, but I'm not a lyricist. But it was one of the most joyful experiences ever. I wrote 22 songs, and some of them are still in the show. Believe is still in the show. There are different parts of songs that are still very much there. And then we needed to find composers to write music for my lyrics. And the idea was to get Dave Stewart, who I only knew through the Eurythmics, and I wasn't quite sure if Dave was the right guy. And the meeting that we had originally, I mean, he's a great composer, but I didn't feel that it was quite right. And he suggested bringing in a partner to work with him named Glenn Ballard, who the two of them are like two of the great songwriters. I mean, Glenn did Jagged Little Pill and he worked with Michael Jackson. I mean, these guys are substantial. And then I sat down with Dave, interestingly enough, and I went into his office and we just picked one of the songs out of the hat, and he just started to compose music. And I listened to him, and it was like right out of the box, he had found a melodic line that spoke to my heart. I just went, I'm a songwriter. How did that happen? It was so extraordinary. It was so beautiful. And I was really thrilled. I was really thrilled by that. And then Glenn came in and he just added richness to all of this. So there we were, and I was now a lyricist, a writer of a play, a musical, in fact, and we were moving forward. And we ended up getting this remarkable director, Matthew Warchus, who I could not have been a luckier person than to find somebody like him. Just brilliant, inventive mind, and so we started to do workshops with my songs, their music, Matthew putting it all together, and then Matthew came over to me and said, Bruce, your lyrics are really good, but we have two of the best songwriters in the world working on this show. Would you mind letting them have a go at maybe playing with those lyrics? And my heart sunk on one level, but another part of me went, of course, he's totally right. Why not give this over to the best people there are? And they took over, and their lyrics were wonderful, really wonderful. And when there was disagreement, we interwove our lyrics together, and it all worked. And I became part of a musical team that I can only tell you, if you're looking for joy in life, in the world, do a Broadway West End musical and work with people like this. Discover what it's like to work with actors and dancers and singers who are the most wonderful people alive, joyous and literally in endless motion and full of life. And I got to be part of that. So the fact that we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary, which is 10 years since it opened in Manchester, but 14 years since I started saying okay to this whole process. It truly is one of the great experiences of this life. And a movie is wonderful. And Ghost was the most wonderful movie that I worked on because Jerry Zucker and I became very, very good friends in the process. The collaboration was like nothing that happens in Hollywood. In Hollywood, writers usually are not allowed on the set. With Jerry, as I was there every day. And it was our collective experience that made that film so powerful. And but when a movie is over, you've met some of the actors in that film for the 2 months that they're shooting. But a lot of actors, you see them the day they interview or audition for the part, the day they shoot, and then maybe at one of the screenings.
Yeah.
They don't know you, you don't know them really. It's a quick hello, goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have that kind of incredible engagement. A musical takes months and months and months, years to really make itself known. And so you get to know people. And the people who worked on the musical, especially the UK version, have remained really close and important to me. And I have a love for them that's hard to explain, but they gave me a period of joy in my life that was beyond understanding. And the fact that there are people like you who have really understood the undercurrents of this play and why it has impact and power and musical value, that you wanted to celebrate this anniversary was so remarkable to me, and it makes me so happy because it really is it's worth celebrating, if only
Absolutely.
personally for me, because it came alive. It really found a life, and I'm so grateful.
With You is probably one of the most recognizable songs from the show, and probably musical theatre at the moment. There's so many people doing covers of it and what have you. How was that song born?
Quickly. I don't remember all the genesis of it. It was not originally there. Matthew felt we needed a song in that place. I had written a song that pretty much starts, I picked up your clothes this morning. That came out of the movie, and I created a kind of a song for that, and we had another song there, but for some reason, Matthew, I think mostly, but maybe in conjunction with Glenn and Dave, felt there was something else to be born there. And the song With You happened during a rehearsal, I think, and it happened so fast. I mean, within a day, that song was written and being performed, and it had instantaneous power. People just understood the longing that came out of that song, and the fact that I still have a few opening words and lines in it is meaningful to me on some level, not in an egoistic way, but I gave it birth. It found what it wanted to say, and I do watch it on have in America, it's America's Got Talent, but whatever what you call it in the UK, but it's and I do find when I hear people sing it, I'm very moved that a song survived. I mean, in some perfect world, you become Rodgers and Hammerstein, and all of your songs become part of the larger collective. Here we now have kind of like one song that's broken out, but excuse me, it kind of doesn't matter. The songs all work deeply within the show, and I like that has a life of its own.
Yeah. In the original production and in London, the hospital ghost sang Ball of Wax, and then that was changed for the American version to You've Got to Let Go. What was the reasoning behind that?
I'm not sure I remember. I think the term ball of wax itself felt very dated, and that a lot of people really didn't gravitate toward that, and that the real teaching of the song is the let go idea, that Sam needed to learn to let go of his attachment to being alive, because he's no longer part of the material world. And so it just seemed like, from a kind of like a teacherly spiritual perspective, a more valuable song. I kept trying to do A Whole New Ball of Wax because it was part of the character in the movie, and it felt like a song that kind of would work, and it did. It did. I mean, it worked. But in the end, I do think that Gotta Let Go kind of modulated that section of the show a little bit better, and we didn't need a big song and dance. I think everybody kind of felt at that moment, and it kind of lost the tonality. So not a bad choice on my part, but shows evolve. That's one of the great things about musical theater, or any theater, but musical theater especially. Oh, it's never really done. It evolves, it changes, and hopefully it changes with you as the creative people doing the changes.
Yeah.
But you don't have control over casting and other productions. You don't have control over the sets or the lighting or the magic or any of the other elements that go into making the show. So I get to see it from so many different perspectives. And I really like that. And the fact that it mostly holds up in most productions. I mean, I've seen some where you go, well, I wish they had changed that or done this, but it kind of doesn't matter. And in the long run, it's like, this is just so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions I get asked a lot, and I don't actually know the answer to this. In the original and London versions, Willie Lopez lived at 303 Prospect Place, apartment 4D, and then he moved when he got to Broadway to Lenox Avenue, apartment 4D. Do you know the reason behind that?
I think it has to do with the fact that there's a real Lenox Avenue in Manhattan, and that people related more directly to a location when they heard it. So that, I think, was the only real reason. Those kinds of things for me are about, a 12th of a second worth of thought. It's like, oh, and they just happen. I never linger over that.
It's amazing how many fans picked up on that, to be fair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
How long did the casting process take? I mean, Casey, Richard, Sharon, and Andrew as the four leads were absolutely sublime. But how long did the casting process take?
I don't exactly remember. I loved being part of it. I loved what I was learning about the show, watching it happen, both as in the movie and then in the musical. I loved hearing different voices. I loved seeing different characters. Matthew had a very strong hand in the casting, and Glenn and Dave, who understand music much more than I do, and I don't understand. To me, a good voice, just almost anybody has a good voice. On some level, I get very easily swayed by people who sing, but they knew when somebody could hit notes that I didn't know they could hit. Or I don't know a flat note from a sour note. I have no idea, but I do know that the casting was rich. It was just rich. Watching the talent in the UK is like overwhelming. And they were all kind of obvious. Richard was younger than I had imagined Sam would be. He was more boyish. And yet, when he performed, he attained a level of maturity and solidity and confidence that kind of blew me away. He was just amazing in his presence on the stage, and he really, really worked with Casey. They were a wonderful team. All of them, every. I mean, I love actors. I just love actors, and I would walk into the room every day with them in the rehearsal space, and I felt, how did this happen to me? To watch this talent and to watch them learn the roles and to be part of teaching in a way that what was intended. I mean, of course, they have to finally determine for themselves how they arrive at a delivery of a line or a feeling. But I got to be able to express how I came at it, and they were very quick learners, and their humility is so extraordinary. And it was like just such a gift to find them. We have seen a lot of other people doing rehearsals that we would do, workshops, I guess we called them, who were wonderful. They were just really wonderful. And I kind of imagined the people in the workshop would go forward and be the people in the show, but I didn't realize the level and depth of talent that would arise. And when I saw it, I was like, this is incredible. And it just kept going on and on and on every level. And then I have to say, almost to a person, the whole cast the whole the whole crew were among the nicest people, the most wonderful people I have ever come across. It may just be because they're all from the UK, and I happen to be a big fan of the UK. I love London. I love Manchester. I love being there. I love everything about it. And so I was in heaven.
Was there a reason Manchester was chosen for the world premiere?
Probably. I don't know that I know what it was. I think the theater was available. And we needed time. We wanted to be out of town, of course.
Mhm.
And it was a great place to stage a workshop or to rehearse and learn the show. It was a very well-equipped theater. And it was, it was like being in the womb, really. It was an exquisitely beautiful space to find your feet and to find out who you were, take your first breaths in a way, and then break out into the world and be ready for the West End. And so it was exceedingly, exceedingly detailed, demanding, rich process. But the first night in Manchester, when we had the first delivery of the show, I was sitting in fifth row, I guess, center. Matthew was near me, and all of us were just sitting there. And the audience, from the moment the name Ghost appeared on the front curtain, there was a kind of a excitement that was really nothing I'd witnessed before, ever. And it was there through the show. So there was like a level of appreciation. But at the very end of the show, there was a roar that came from the uppermost part of the balcony and swooped down through the whole theater as people shot to their feet and they were screaming, screaming. And I was just shivering. I mean, that they really liked the show, or maybe even loved the show. And I didn't know what to make of that, except that I was thinking, and which I think is probably natural, you have a hit. And Matthew turned to me and said, Bruce, you need 5 of those in a row to have a hit. We're 5 nights of roaring, every night, roar, every night. And I thought, we have really arrived at something that's going to really impact and touch people. And that was a great thing. And I was just in love with the fact that somehow or another magic had taken place.
I think from memory, I think there was a standing ovation at every single performance in Manchester for the entire run.
I wasn't there every time, but every time I was there, yes, that was the case. And not only in Manchester, I mean, in London, elsewhere, the show really had an enormous, I think, acceptance in the UK. The only problem we ran into was the New York Times came to see the show, Ben Brantley, in London, and did not like it for a lot of reasons. One of which, here, I'll show you something. This is something I had my son printed up for me. It comes from the movie. I will read it to you. The New York Times, says Sam to Molly, because they had not liked her pottery. The New York Times is some frustrated little critic with pimples on his ass who flunked out of art school. Who cares what the New York Times thinks? That's right there.
Yeah,
I think that was the source of Ben Brantley's review of Ghost, but it was a big disappointment for me. I really had hoped we would go past that. I think he would probably argue that the film even was not his cup of tea, and this kind of show was not his cup of tea, and it's all fine in the end, and the New York Times did make life difficult for us in the New York version of the show. But what has proven to be real about it, because the show has been and is continuing to travel all over the world, is that people love it. They just love it. It touches them in a certain way. It is affirming in a big way. And one of the ways that I think is most important to human beings, that it doesn't make a fantasy about the idea that life goes on beyond the human experience. It talks about it directly. It shows it. It demonstrates it. And then it shows that it goes further than any of us can imagine. Sam leaves Molly, but their last lines to each other are "see ya, see ya." And then he also says, "The love inside, you take it with you," which is an amazing revelation, if we can believe that. And of course, as a writer, I do believe that. And that line, Jerry Zucker kept saying to me, we need a Casablanca line, some line that people will walk away from the movie with that will last. And we couldn't find it for the life of us. We just couldn't find it. So Jerry was at my house in Los Angeles, and I had to go get some medicine for my son at the drugstore. And we were in the car together driving there. And I said something to him like, you can't take it with you. And then I went, whoa, wait a minute. You can take it with you. The love inside, you take it with you. He said, yes, yes, that's it. That's our line. And that is our line. It's still there. It still works.
Do you think the musical version, because it's live and it's in front of your face, do you think it's more emotional than the film?
Not necessarily. I think they play differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different versions of the musical even. Movies kind of pull you in. Theater, much of theater, and certainly the early productions of Ghost, opened up and went out to the audience in a big way. They were broad. They were blasting in a way that with their ingenuity and cleverness and the magic and the scrims that were all sort of alive with images. And I loved it. The audience just felt taken over by the show. But there are other versions of the musical, interestingly, that are very intimate, mm-hmm. where it does not come out to the audience. You have to go onto the stage. That works for me too. And in the movie, it comes out and you go in. And the actors, Patrick and Demi particularly, were very seductive. And so you got pulled in. It's a bigger job on stage to pull people into that intimate kind of space. It can be done, and part of it is done through music. The music lulls you into the auditorium or into the stage itself. And so I don't know which has more emotional power. A lot of it depends on what the audience brings to it the night they go to the theater. And everybody's different, and every night will be different. Mm-hmm. So, I'm always very intrigued watching audiences as the handkerchiefs come out toward the end, and seeing the emotional vitality of the show in almost every form. And I think it has something to do with the underlying elements of the story rather than the production value. And I really think that it conveys a message that here we are 30 some years later still speaks. I've written a lot of movies that do not have 30-year celebrations, and plays that don't. I've never written a play musical, but the fact that we're here 10 years after is still something. And it has to do with what is it that an audience wants to get out of seeing something in front of them. And if you deliver, they'll be there for you. And if you don't deliver, they won't. And somehow Ghost delivered.
Were there any parts of the movie that you couldn't get into the stage show, or wish you could have done because of time constraints, technical reasons?
Not really. Not really. They became two different things with a lot of continuity between them, but they were not. They are really. They are different mediums, and I did not try to preserve really anything from the movie other than storyline and sort of emotional directiveness. That's what was important to me, and I think that's what happened. The continuity is there, so I see them as very separate entities, and I think both of them have great value and pleasure aspect, and so I feel really good about it. But no, I don't think there was anything missing in the end for me in the musical. And I just felt, the movie gives you a bigger breadth. There's a lot more movement. There's a lot more variability in terms of location. sets are different. But the wonderful thing about the musical that is not in the movie, which is interesting, is special effects in a movie are just special effects. You walk through a wall. What we understood in the play, and the whole play is geared around it, is the power of the magical moment. And Paul Keeve, who did the magic, he's one of the great magicians of our time, really, conceptualized ways of making an audience see something that could not happen, like a man walking through a door in front of you. And when that took place, it was bigger than anything that happened in the movie because it was really happening and it was really powerful, and the audience felt it. They just felt it. And I love that. I love the celebration of that, you know, and Sam disappearing at the end of the show, all the, and appearing and disappearing. I mean, they're just touches of magic that made going out to the theater to see the play a different experience than going to a movie cinema and seeing it there. It's just different and worth it, worth the effort, because it delivered. It just gave you magic.
Especially the door scene. I think everybody knew it was coming, but you could literally hear the breath being taken as he actually did it. And on numerous occasions, it just garnered a massive round of applause.
Oh yeah, almost always, I think.
It was phenomenal. It really was. I was going to ask you how you felt at the end of the first performance, but you covered that quite eloquently earlier on. So what's your fondest memory of the last 10 years of Ghost?
That it's provided my wife and I an opportunity to fly all over the world. Moscow, Sydney, Australia, Korea, Japan. I mean, you name it. We've been everywhere, you know, and it keeps happening. I mean, last year, just before the pandemic, we were in Madrid and we were in Paris, and watching the show in each location and finding its tonality shift and seeing how it works there as opposed to somewhere else, knowing that it keeps playing in high schools and colleges and small theaters all over the world. And it's like being part of that and not being there to be celebrated, because I don't really care about that. It's being there to witness this gift that keeps giving. And Ghost has been one of the great experiences of my life. You know, I've had about 10 or 12 movies produced, and I'm very happy with all of the films, and they're all quite wonderful in many ways. But nothing has approached Ghost in terms of its return on so many levels. It's just loved. It's just so loved. So I feel very grateful for that, and the play happening everywhere and continuing to happen as we speak, including touring the UK. You know, it just, you know, the Ken Wright's group keeps it alive in a way, and I just like go, thank you. It's just such a gift, and I would love it to go back to the West End. I'd like to have another show, another presentation of it there. But I'm not greedy, you know. I'm happy with what I've had. But I really am I'm very grateful that we had this, that this came into being, and that, you know, that you decided that you wanted to acknowledge it and celebrate it. I didn't even quite realize it was the 10-year anniversary. I had to ask you, well, where and when, you know. It hadn't dawned on me, but it is an achievement, and it's had devotees like you who have really supported this work and have loved it in a way that inspires me. It makes me grateful that I was able to give you and the people you talk to and inspire such a real experience, and an ongoing one. You know, one of the nice things about the show is just because you experience it once doesn't mean that experience is in the past. It keeps happening and will keep happening because it has a vibrancy and a liveliness and an immediacy that is just there. It's been a great, you know, real joy, total joy.
Well, I mean, from me personally, I'm sure for every other fan around the world, you just got to say a huge thank you. It's a show that it probably changed my life. We've spoken before about what it means to be in personal situations, and there is just something about it that will live with me forever.
I mean, as a writer, I couldn't be happier than to know that and to hear that. You know, in some films that I've written, I haven't gotten that kind of feedback. Or occasionally I will get it from like one person and I'll go, well, that's why I made the movie. I didn't, you know, I don't need it to be mass audience accepted. I just need to make these pieces of whatever they're called, art, work, you know, film, theater, and know that somewhere, somehow, someone is being touched. That's a really, it's a remarkable feeling. And the interesting thing about being a writer, especially in theater or in Hollywood, is you don't know. You don't get feedback. I don't usually. You know, I mean, I always tell people the first year that Ghost opened as a movie, and it was the biggest film of the year, I would never meet anyone who saw it.
Yeah.
I've never, no idea what that meant. I would be in the cab with a guy and he said, what do you do? I'm a writer. What have you written? I'm Ghost. Oh, I think I heard of that. That's what I would get constantly. You know, or once standing in line, I heard people talking about, have you seen that horrible movie Ghost? And I just stepped out of line, you know. So you don't get a lot of strokes. And I don't look for strokes. I just look for do your job, hope it works. And then every so often something like this moment happens and you come back and you say, let's celebrate this. And I go, thank you.